Oh,
We are ready to start. So whenever y'all is settled.
You got about 5 minutes if you want to wait. Yeah, if you want to wait. I don't want to wait.
I'm in no hurry whatsoever. I'm where I need to be.
That's the
So.
first thing I'm checking right now.
This.
62, it's still got a silly problems again.
Well, we can work
Yeah,
off of
see,
that.
that's a problem.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, that's not true, I don't know why too.
100% of the people who took the survey are not in fact female.
Yeah.
There is some percentage of other people there.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna say that now.
Little survey glitch. Survey glitch.
We had a survey glitch, but we mostly remember more or less the results of the survey.
We do have the data.
We can still
just
give you a
our
panel
file is
today, don't
very-
worry.
Yeah, don't worry, that's not gonna affect anything.
So I guess now is as good a time as any to start. So.
Yeah.
Shall I kick it off?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, welcome everybody to the Gender and Sexuality in the Mother Series panel. My name is Nicole Johnson. I'm Princess Noodlins on Starman.net, and I'm here because, like most of you, I'm interested in gender and sexuality, and I am a trans person myself, so I've got some first-hand experience with transition, stuff like that.
I am the ultimate chimera, except not really. My name is Karen. I was the one who orchestrated this panel and started the idea.
Mastermind.
Yes, hello. I am also Marietta RC on the forums, or to people on Tumblr, Marietta PK. And I myself am a cisgendered female, but I'm also bisexual. So I have quite a bit of idea on the subject myself.
And I'm Boots. I go by Boots on the forum. I'm just your regular old cis-het dude, but I'm interested in this kind of stuff, and I wanted to help Marietta and Nicole talk about it, since I think Earthbound's a pretty special game, just in general, but it also has some interesting things about gender that you can talk about. So I guess we'll jump right into it.
Yeah. So the first thing that we would like to discuss is gender roles in the Mother series. This is something that's pretty big because, you know, the first game started off with, you know, you've got your male hero, and then you've got the girl, and then the other two are also boys. The girl's the one wearing the pink dress and the hat.
It was an endemic thing in video games for a long time, and cartoons. You have, like, all the characters with their different personalities, and then the girl. Like, that's her personality, she's the girl.
The one girl.
Yeah.
The one girl, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
And we see that again in Earthbound, and I'll say this probably to some people who won't like it, but for all its greatness, Earthbound, the character of Paula isn't maybe the greatest representation of a woman in video games ever. It's certainly not the worst. I know. I am expelled from Camp Fangamer for saying that. It's definitely not the worst, but there are a few things that they can improve on. The first thing, obviously, is all of Paula's items are very stereotypical. All the ones you get her the bow, the different versions of frying pans. Some are really like kick-ass later on, but it's still a frying pan.
Yeah.
Like, she probably could have used other items, but she gets all of that. She does get she gets damseled twice.
And everyone's familiar with what that means, right? Like,
yeah, so she gets captured and she requires the guys to come and save her. Although it's a little bit more nuanced, because the first time when you're first rescuing Paula from Car Painter, trapped in that jail shack thing with the weird perspective. I always remembered that for some reason. The interesting thing is that when you go meet her, she's not all, "Oh, my hero, you've come to save me." She actually talks to the player and says, "Man, if you hadn't been here earlier, or if you hadn't been here in the next 5 minutes, I would have busted myself out of here." And I mean, that's pretty cool. Like, she's got personality now. She's no longer just a MacGuffin to be collected.
We should also mention, though, the translation issue. Like,
and the translation thing. And we have Marcus Lindblom to thank for that.
Yes.
Awesome character of Paula.
Yes, please give her Not a lot of people seem to know this, but in Mother 2, she says something different. She says something along the lines of, "If you hadn't come and saved me, I would have started crying."
So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So she says
already,
about
that's a
the-
huge
already,
difference
that's
in
really
character.
bad.
Yeah. Changes her at least from a very passive kind of character who's always second in line next to at least someone with a little bit more personality.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she can handle. She becomes, I guess you could call her a glass cannon later on in the game. But the thing I really liked about Paula as a character is that without her, you can't beat Earthbound.
Yeah.
Exactly.
She is the one key, which is kind of unseen in regular RPGs usually. It's all about the guy you're playing as. He's gonna beat the game. If it wasn't for him,
Yeah.
you wouldn't do it. But no,
Usually
Earthbound's...
it's even involving like teamwork as well. Like usually it can sometimes be a team effort, but in this case it's specifically dependent on the girl to do the job to save them. It's because it's all about saying, oh, Ness and the other three are going to be the ones to defeat Gigas, but the fact is that he doesn't do anything that actually saves the world. In the end, he doesn't actually save everyone on his own.
Yeah. The thing I liked about Earthbound is it's really all about the chosen four.
Yeah.
You need every single one of the members of your party in order to have a hope of beating the game.
We should also mention before we get too deep in,
we're
going to be talking about Mother 3 some, and there's going to be some spoilers.
I'm pretty sure most of you guys know
I think
about
we should rephrase that earlier.
There's a spoiler sitting right there.
Okay.
Don't look at her
This
back.
was something we talked about. We just
First
wanted
of
to
all,
make sure.
let me ask this question: have any of you not played Mother 3?
Alright, you guys might have to leave the room.
Okay, no, we won't go too far into spoilers, but there are going to be some minor things that we'll be discussing in terms of Mother 3. There are a lot of things that we want to discuss in terms of Mother 3.
I guess continuing on this topic of gender roles, why don't we look at the differences and similarities between Paula and Kumatora? Because at a first glance you might seem, oh, they're wildly different characters. One's a tomboy, the other is just the girl who grew up in the preschool and
Wears a pink dress and a
wears a pink dress, yeah. But if you actually look at it, if we're going by the lines of dialogue that we have from Paula and her saying things like, I'm gonna bust out, and generally not being afraid and helpless in situations like that, that's kind of like Kumatora in Mother 3. So
Not that different.
it's not that
They're
different,
not
and what we have in Mother 3 is basically just a more fleshed out character of maybe what Paula could have been or what Paula was written to be. They just didn't have enough lines of code to put in more dialogue.
Yeah. I think it's also worth saying that when usually you have, or at least in those early days, you have, the girl who's wearing the pink and the bow and such. The way Paula's character is built, it also shows that, even though that's a very common trope, to have the girl with the pink dress, the feminine girl, basically, with how her character is built, it shows that it is not a bad thing to be feminine and still be able to kick ass.
That's true.
Yeah, and that's something that's sort of
It's
a hard issue to figure out, where to get on, because in one sense, you're subverting a stereotype, in another sense, you're perpetuating it.
Yeah.
Which one wins,
That's all to interpretation, how people decide to see it.
I was thinking about this in the shower. That's where I do all my good things. And lost my train of thought. I'll remember it.
Because looking at both Mother 2 and
State-dependent memory. I'm not wet.
Yeah.
Mother 3, you either have the tomboy or the helpless girl, but that's not actually true when you play the game.
Yeah, Paula is neither.
That's what's pretty good about Earthbound. It's that even though it has a little flaws with the damseling and all of that, it's like, well, this is actually a pretty cool character when you look into it.
Remember what I was gonna say? When you're creating art, and that's what a video game is, particularly a story that's based somewhere in the real world, which, as we all know, Earthbound is more so than most JRPGs. You have to decide, okay, what do I want to take from the real world so that I'm representing the real world? And what do I want to take from how it should be? And you kind of create a mixture. Whenever you create your own story or your own world, you kind of have to say, okay, I'm borrowing, girls sometimes wear pink, sometimes their moms make them, maybe Paula gets dressed by her mother, we don't know that. Maybe she hates pink.
Who knows?
But,
Headcanons, it all works out.
She has that kind of 3-pixel smile.
Yeah.
That's all in the line. So I don't know if she actually enjoys dress or not. It's hard to tell.
you want to, some part of you wants to be like, okay, this is how the world should be, it shouldn't matter, everything's equal, but that's not how the world is, and after a certain point, you're kind of misrepresenting reality.
Yeah.
So, pink wearing badass or stereotypical girly girl, it's hard to choose.
I'd like to bring up something as well. I got or I guess I didn't get it, but I read a response to something on Tumblr that basically was a response to someone saying, or at least a group of people saying that Paula is comparable to Princess Peach, to where she would get kidnapped and do nothing about it, barring the Paper Mario games, because obviously that's not.
Yeah.
But that's enough. That's all another story. And this person's response was that they are actually not that alike for reasons that we brought up before. The fact that Paula does not, in fact, do nothing when she gets kidnapped. For instance, the second time she gets kidnapped by the department store Mook, she doesn't cry out for help. You don't hear her crying out. She has, let's keep in mind, she has telepathy. She has contacted people before. She has not done that beyond needing help from Jeff or from Ness when it was necessary. She could have done that at any time, but she didn't.
Yeah, when you actually, when you hook back up with her, she's like, oh yeah, by the way, this is Geldegard Montoli. He's okay. He's alright. He's not a bad guy.
They're just having a pleasant conversation.
Yeah, from the looks of it, she didn't resort to violence. When,
No, we talked it out.
Yeah, they talked it out. He's cool.
I wish I could have seen that part of the game.
That would have been great.
So
I
what you're
agree.
telling me is, this thing's evil.
Well, I choose to believe in my headcanon that Paul is advising Geldegard on financial, his helicopter business, but that's just me. But yeah, I guess we can jump into the survey then if we're done talking about gender roles.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
could talk about gender roles all day.
Okay, so we made a survey, and thank you to Tragic Manor for hosting the survey for us.
A lot of you probably took it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many took the survey?
How many
in
took
the
the
room?
survey? Yeah, somebody in the room.
Hooray!
Nice.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you guys so much. Without you, we would have half an hour less of things to talk about.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, so we had over 170 responses altogether, and I find that to be very impressive. And out of all of those responses, the majority have played Earthbound, but the majority preferred Mother 3. And 1/3 of those people, they said that the games actually helped them with their identity. And one major reason for that is the Magypsies.
Yeah, that is an interesting topic.
We can't have a gender and sexuality panel without mentioning the Magypsies.
Yeah,
You guys should see this coming.
they are the big gender ambiguous elephant in the room. As a trans person, I don't know exactly how to feel about them. I love them as characters, obviously. But on the other hand, their appearance is really stereotypically like an outdated idea of what a transsexual looks like. Like a dude in a dress.
Yeah, basically
Yeah.
just in drag.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing I will say about the Magypsies, when I first played, I played with my older sister there.
it's a blunt stereotype.
Yeah. And when we got to the Magypsies, I was like, what the heck are these?
Yeah.
This is like little middle school me playing on a computer, like, what the heck are these things? And I asked my sister, I was like, are these supposed to be guys or girls? And she told me, she said, they're not supposed to be anything, they're just Magypsies.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a, oh my god, that's a possibility?
I think they're supposed to make you ask that question.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's, at least for me, that was the defining thing about the Magypsies. It was
Yeah.
the moment in Mother 3 where it expanded my horizons in a real world sense.
Yeah.
Now
Also,
here's
to be fair, in the game, it actually states they're neither man
Yeah.
or woman.
Yes.
That's right,
They're
they're-
human at all.
They're agents.
yeah,
Exactly.
that brings me to my opinion on the Magypsies. I find them to be absolutely wonderful characters in terms of both their characters and how they are presented. Because it is said before you even meet them, they are, like you said, they are neither man nor woman. So to say that they're supposed to be stereotypical drag queens, that implies that they're men wearing dresses. But they're not men. They're not women either. All they are characters. They are agendered who choose to present themselves how they choose. They happen to just want to present themselves in a feminine way. That's called gender. That's called gender expression.
Yeah, there's two really standout types of agenderedness that come to mind to me right off the bat. One is sort of androgyny in the sense of not having any really standout defining masculine or feminine features. The other is having both.
Yeah.
The Magypsies have both. They're like, well, these humans, they have this facial hair. I like that. I'll put that on. Oh, but they also have these dresses. I'll put one of those on. They kind of a la carte gender,
Yeah.
which is a little bit more like how it should be.
Yeah, really.
So
Yeah, 'cause People need to there are people that need to understand that there is a difference between gender identity and gender expression.
Yeah.
The Gypsies, they do not have any gender identity. They do, however, have very strong gender expression. They love to wear makeup, they shave their legs, they wear dresses, they have facial hair, and they don't care. They don't care if it's they don't even care if it's masculine or feminine, it just looks good on them.
Yeah.
And it makes them confident. And a lot of people who took the survey, they said that their confidence is what helped them be confident in themselves, in their identity, and not care whether they are male, female, both, neither, and how they present themselves. So they are a very good lesson of don't be afraid of expressing yourself how you want to, as long as you feel confident in doing so. Because self-love is very important.
I want to talk about Mixolydia for a little bit. So, I might be remembering this wrong because I've only played Mother 3 once. But
How dare you?
I know, right? If I recall correctly, Missy is the one that you meet, and she has Ocho,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And the weird thing about that is that when you're hallucinating, she appears as this really stereotypical, beautiful, cis woman. And then when you stop hallucinating, she looks like how she looks. And I guess I wasn't sure quite what to make of that. We had a discussion briefly on Starman about her, where it was like,
Yeah.
what's that supposed to mean? What's that saying, you know? I sort of chose to think that it's probably like the characters perceived her that way.
Well, if we look at what
That is
happens
definitely one way
at
of
Tani
looking at
Tani, spoilers for anyone who
Yeah,
hasn't gotten there,
yeah.
you get, basically, you take shrooms, and you get
Yeah.
into a completely altered state of mind
Utterly messed up.
that's psychedelic and horrifying.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so,
And it's been stated, I think, that it was sort of like supposed to be evocative of the character's deepest fears.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like Lucas is hallucinating his father, saying he's gonna beat him.
Yeah,
That was
like
horrible.
very horrible
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Very horrible things that hit me
And
way too
Luke
hard as a middle
Kumatora
schooler.
is a stick that no one loves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things like that.
And so, to see that kind of projection on the world when we get to the Gypsies, something
Yeah.
that's already confusing for most people.
Yeah.
And to say, what does it mean now that Lucas or whoever the player is seeing them as a girl instead of
Right.
what they really are? It's interesting thing to talk about.
To me, I see it as, I guess, how the characters in their hallucinated state, how do I say this? It's how they see these characters like in their state of mind. I know I'm not really making any sense. It's hard to form words. But basically, okay, you know that the shrooms basically like feed on their fears and, you know, such and such. But when they come to Mixolydia, there is no fear or hostility in that environment. It's actually very pleasant and welcoming. And
It's a
you
haven from
yeah.
what you've been experiencing up to that point. Like,
Yeah,
thank
exactly.
goodness I'm here.
Yeah. You see Ocho as this, it's like a
guy in a
handsome,
suit, isn't he?
handsome
Ruggedly
young
handsome
guy in a
sailor
suit.
guy.
Yeah.
I like him as an octopus, but that's
Now, you can also, I have two ways of seeing this. This is either the character's interpretation of them, or it's how they perceive themselves. Mixolydia seeing themselves as, you know, just absolutely beautiful. It doesn't even have to be a woman, just being beautiful. They could be seen as, well, yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
And Ocho could see himself as the same way. I mean, you see when you get out of that state, he's an octopus, but he's still wearing that cute little hat, and he doesn't care. He's all polite, and you know that this is probably how he sees himself on the inside. And so that's another way I choose to see it.
Oh,
Yes.
hello. So on the back of Ocho, it says taxi on the
Yes.
back
Yes.
and turns away. And when I was living in Japan for a time, a lot of the taxi drivers actually dressed like his human form, as though he's some sort of chauffeur.
Oh, I see.
So that's sort of how I saw that.
I learned
character.
something today. I
Yeah.
like that.
This is
That
why
actually is a
Yeah,
supporting
it's
point for this.
yeah.
Yeah.
If he aspires to be a taxi guy, but he's an octopus.
Well, he has to
So-
taxi you back home.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah.
enough.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, it's just my opinion about it, because I've heard stuff about this happens to a lot of people all the time, because I work on a university campus, but when people, like, their very first time getting, like, really high, or getting, like, mega drunk, you know, things start looking different because they're under the influence, so I just thought, because they took the shrooms, it's they're all their first times, like, getting mega ass high.
Yeah.
So, that things started looking like the way they should. And I'm not saying that her the way they saw her meant
Yeah.
anything. I just thought they were like super dope mushrooms.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, yeah, this is a very open panel discussion, so
Yeah, feel
anybody
free
have
to
comments,
jump in, yeah.
jump in.
Do our job for us.
I guess one thing I might say is in their struggle to find, I don't know, sanity or whatever, sobriety.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, bro.
They
Sobriety.
grabbed what they could, and that's the easiest, like, lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And if that made it easier for them to understand that they could cling on to, whether or not it's actually what's in front of them, perhaps that's where they went.
And that's
But then
kind of
It's what it
Yeah.
represented for them personally.
Yeah.
Like what the stereotypical safe haven with like a beautiful woman and a dude in a sailor who's actually an octopus.
I don't know what you guys
Everyone's
that's
haven's
my
like
happy
that.
place.
And it might be thinking a little too deeply about it, but
No such thing.
No such thing,
No such
definitely
thing.
not.
But considering that so much of everything else they saw was unusual
Yeah.
and kind of horrifying in that way that you said, it could be interpreted as, they come into this situation and the fact that these are our stereotypical views of people is something that is not okay. That, Mix Lydia is actually beautiful the way she is.
Yeah.
And the octopus fellow whose name I have conveniently forgotten.
Ocho.
Is also beautiful the way he is too, and he can still do what he wants to do despite his form. So I don't know if anything can be said for that.
I like that interpretation, frankly, because I always sort of rankle a little bit when people say, well, Mix Lydia looks beautiful when you're on shrooms, and then she looks normal when you're not. Like, whoa, okay, wait a minute.
I kind of mean she's always beautiful. It's just
Yeah.
a bit of a different
I
view
think
while
the term
sure.
they're looking for is like socially normative.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. That's a good word for it, actually.
And with how Itoi and the team has always kind of addressed like environmental things or what have you, it wouldn't be surprising that they would try to tackle something like image created through advertising and the common idea of.
Absolutely.
Well, especially in Mother 3, which is all about the corporate
Exactly.
versus the
So
natural.
that
Yeah.
wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yeah. I'm reading, I got the survey up, it's the updated survey, but someone had a comment here about Kumatora that I really, really like. If this was your comment, just say, they said,
Feel free.
might have been one of you guys. Once you get to play as Kumatora, there's a girl who mistakes her for a male,
Yeah.
which I believe that Kumatora could use, which leads me to believe that Kumatora may feel comfortable using female and male pronouns, most likely influenced by her guardians, the gypsies. And yeah, it's a pretty good point. Let's talk about Kumatora.
Yeah, she gets misgendered a couple of times, I think. There's the
I think
little
it's happened
kid.
about twice.
Yeah. There's a little kid, and then someone else says she's manly.
Yeah.
Don't they? Like,
I don't. Oh, in the Japanese version, doesn't she actually refer to herself as ore, which is like a
It's a very masculine
Is
way
that
to
so?
talk.
Yeah, I'm
I
pretty
didn't
sure.
know.
Oh, I
So like,
didn't know that.
like in Japanese, you have watashi, which is sort of gender neutral. Boku, which is like a polite masculine, and then ore is like tough guy, kind of
Oh, I
like
see.
Like a dude.
yeah,
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
or like a bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
The
like,
fact that she
I'm a
says
bro.
ore when she is speaking to people probably leads to the misunderstanding, but I think also says a lot about how she holds herself.
yeah.
Well, it's an integral part of her identity.
Yeah. And
Like
that's.
that.
Oh, sorry.
The ore thing is actually really interesting because that's something that you see in modern day Japan. Girls with other girls in groups that are exclusively female will use male or female pronouns like ore or watashi or the more feminine atashi among themselves. And then when they're talking with a mixed gender group, they usually revert, I guess, back to the more standard and socially acceptable stuff like watashi.
Wow.
So in media, you only see girls using boku or ore when they are trying to project that image because of that kind of stereotype. But yeah, even in Japan in modern day, girls use masculine pronouns when they're only talking to girls.
I think it also is worth mentioning that Japan is a country that is very gender stratified.
Yes.
There's different, most languages outside of English have gendered, pronouns and everything for all types of things, but Japanese in particular is very, particularly rigid when it comes to gender norms.
There have been a lot of strides in the way of LGBT rights recently, but even within, in particular, lesbian relationships, there's still that stereotype amongst lesbians that there's the feminine one and there's the
Unfortunately.
Right, there's the man in the
Unfortunately.
relationship.
Sorry, that
Yeah.
this is interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I can relate to that heavily.
I was going to say, but that's kind of what's part of, by putting it through the lens of the whole series, which is so amazing, I think to everyone, is that it is a Japanese view on Western.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the whole thing always, all of it goes through that lens. So it kind of, you really kind of have to understand both the Japanese perspective on it, and then what part of that is them versus what part of that is their idea of the West. And that combination, which is so interesting, because that's what I was wondering, it's like, what is the Japanese perspective on?
My gut reaction when I was thinking about gender and the Gypsies and everything was that, and this might stop me if this is kind of, I don't know if this is offensive or insulting, but I sort of was like, well, Japan has a lot farther to go than, say, San Francisco in terms of like gender relations. So when you're gonna blow up a stereotype, you kind of have to start from further behind, if that makes any sense. Like you have more what we would think of as basic things to knock out, like women are feminine. You know, you have to start there as opposed to sort of. Here in the West, we're sort of getting into a really complicated place in gender relations.
That's actually exactly the point I was going to make, is most JRPGs that I've played, it feels like the, transgender or androgynous characters are more often the villains. Especially in Final Fantasy, there's a lot of very transgender.
I remember reading
True anime too.
I forget the exact example of the character, but yeah.
Yeah, Disney.
Disney And we have both Shigesato Itoi and Marcus Lindblom to thank for subverting that whole stereotype and what they're
Marcus
using writing in
Lindblom
their games.
has kind of become a little bit of a hero of mine for that.
Guys, can we talk about Tony?
I love
A good amount of responses in the survey mentioned that Tony, like even just being there, definitely helped them with just not being ashamed of their sexuality, and I think that's absolutely beautiful because it was just his presence alone that did that.
Yeah,
and honestly,
he's just such a charming guy.
I think it's an interesting foil to Pokey, actually, because Ness has his best friend, or his neighbor, who acts like his friend at the start of the game, and the only character to have that similar kind of friend is Jeff and Tony.
Yeah. And
we see how friendships can play out differently in those two.
And I mean, he's so nice. You steal all his cookies, and he still wants to be friends with you.
On his birthday.
On his birthday.
Special birthday decorated cookies.
I don't know where you'd find a better friend.
What?
The great.
Yeah, his other friends spent all night decorating.
yeah.
Poor Tony.
Put a ring on his friend. Put a ring on
And then if you go back and talk to the guy that decorated them after you take them, he's like, I can't believe you could do such a thing.
When I was first playing through Earthbound, I actually didn't get any of the gay undertones in Tony's character. That just went whoop right over my head. I just thought, hey, he's a guy who's a really cool friend. Then I went back and I played it later. I'm like, wow, I did not know he was written to be such like a good representation of gay people in a video game. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah. Now, I played Earthbound for the very first time last year, so I'm kind of the baby in the Earthbound community. But and I streamed it live basically with like 2 other friends, one of them being right here. I did it. And when I got to Tony, I almost instantly shipped him with Jeff. And so every time he showed up, I'm like, hey Jeff, it's your boyfriend! And we were just all gushing over him, and really I just wanted to bring that up because I just really liked him. He's adorable.
That's the one thing in all of these comments, everyone was like, I was so happy there was just mind-boggling amounts of representation in both Mother 2 and Mother 3. And in terms, like, if we're, people said something about age representation, you have, in Mother 3 especially, old man Wes, and just other people getting out there and doing stuff, who would generally be assigned more NPC-ish roles in standard RPGs.
Most definitely.
So, if there's one thing you can say about Earthbound is that it really gets its representation right in a bunch of different fields.
I'd like to also talk about, in Mother 3, especially like Chapter 1, most of the male figures you encounter are pretty stereotypical themselves. They're all tough guys who don't say a lot and carry big pieces of wood. It kind of establishes this is what men do, you know.
And then, Yeah, the beauty of
Exactly.
that is that when you get to the end of the game, when you get to the end of the game, you get that really touching and heartfelt moment with
Don't say what happens.
Yeah, okay.
Don't
You
say
get
what
that really touching and
gonna
heartfelt
cry.
moment that I can't say what happens. That just completely opens up Flint's character to something that wasn't there in the first chapter.
Oh my goodness,
Which
yeah,
is-
that's a very good point.
Yeah, which is amazing character development.
So, what I think is great about Tony is that his being gay isn't used as a substitute for personality.
Exactly,
Yes.
That
Thank you.
his sexual orientation is used to enhance his personality and add an extra layer of depth to his relationship with Jeff. That, like you had said, you know, for a younger person who might not be aware of such things, you know, they just have a really tight friendship, and Tony's cheerful, bubbly, optimistic, and very caring personality comes through. And then when you add that he is gay, that just kind of adds another layer to that, and it makes it deeper.
Yeah.
Instead of so many games that I'm sure we've all seen,
Yeah.
where being gay is a character's only defining trait.
Yeah, that's their personality is that they're gay.
Or that they
And-
like make an entire point of showing that, oh, this character is most
Yeah.
definitely not straight.
So it just makes Tony that much more likable, because
It's
he
nice and
feels
subtle.
real.
You may as well just staple a rainbow flag to the back of some of those characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of gay people really appreciate that. I mean, like, thank you, you know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so there is something I want to say about Kumatora, once again. Her being a subversion of the stereotypical female character, but also basically being the typical tomboy trying, you know, basically, like, there are some people who feel that she's basically the try-hard subversion of it, to where people say, oh, well, there are too many feminine girl characters, let's make her the complete opposite. But there are things like, say, when she has to dress up as Violet. Boy, spoilers. I guess that's a small spoiler. But there is one point where she has to...
She's in this little tiny cocktail dress.
Yeah. And she is forced to do feminine things. Like giggle.
Yeah.
If that's considered
Here's your
feminine.
drink!
Now, yeah, like, as when you're a waitress working for Club Teibu or wherever, you are supposed to giggle after everything you say. And Kumatora absolutely hated that. And not just that, but the other women that work there hated it too. It's not just her, because she's not, you know, like ultra, like, masculine, but the girls who do not, the other girls who work there, they look like they're just, you know, regular girls, whatever.
And that kind of works with the overall point, or I guess one of the many points of Mother 3, which is that, you know, the whole idea of the corporate versus the natural. So Porky's whole empire of, this is the way things should be, you have to
Rigid
pay for money,
definitions, yeah.
we have to get all the girls dressed in dresses, and then versus the natural, which as a result of that point is Kumatora should be able to do what she feels like and dress how she feels like. And because Mother 3 makes the point that the natural will always win out in the end, that supports the point that, yeah, people who feel how they feel should not be put into categories that make them, make them...
Restrained?
Yeah, restrained,
Yeah.
that's the word for a
Suppress
second.
themselves.
Make them restrained to a certain set of traits, however superficial.
Well, do you think that part of her masculine personalities is a response to being raised by the Gypsies who are so
Possibly,
feminine?
yeah, that's what someone was saying in the
She's trying to
survey.
be different than our parents, but when she was Violet, I found that
Yeah.
she was able to sort of slip naturally into that role because she had to, but in the end she'd really just rather be herself.
Exactly, yeah.
Exactly.
I feel like even her color palette represents that with her pink hair and
Exactly.
her blue dress. She's
Yeah.
wearing the two like
Yeah.
opposite colors,
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
the gypsies are constantly in blue and like violet or pink.
And you have to think that's a conscious choice.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's- yeah.
Definitely.
I would actually argue that she's trying to be different from her parents as much as she's emulating them, just in her own way, in her rejection of gender norms.
Well, yeah,
Oh, that could be
Kumatora
it
is a
too.
princess.
But she was being
Yeah.
raised by the
Well,
Gypsies
exactly,
and
yeah.
identifying with Ore and it just being who she is with her short hair, but she's also wearing a dress and pink hair and a blue dress,
Yeah.
kind of thing. I don't think it's a statement against how she was raised as much as it's embracing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
being
for
able
sure.
to do what she wants.
If I remember correctly, when you're first introduced to Kumatora before you actually meet her, you're saying, oh, you're going to meet I'm pretty sure someone says you're going to meet the princess of Osohi, or
Yeah,
when they
Wes does
see her
that.
running around, yeah.
Dress her
Yeah.
up.
And so already that gets a mental image in your mind, and it gets completely subverted when you
Yeah.
actually meet her with her foot stuck in a bear trap, saying she was about to cut it off.
Just
Which is another point.
Just ever
Alright.
throwing a side attack at you.
Yeah, which is another
You see
point.
her, she drops from the ceiling
Yeah.
and like runs down a hall.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something, but first we could say.
And I think another thing about Kumatora that makes her, in some ways, more fleshed out than Paula, because we were talking about earlier that Paula feels like kind of the halfway point.
Yeah.
Is that she does have that mixed gender expression characteristics like humans have,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
real people have.
Well,
Yeah.
Mother 3 as a whole is a
yeah.
way more personal and emotional story than Earthbound. Maybe not for everyone, but at least that's what I felt. There was way more in terms of character development and way more in terms of character personality in the protagonist than you saw in Earthbound.
And I mean, I don't think either that, has a bad reputation, but I don't think people aren't all feminine or all masculine.
Yeah.
We all have some feminine, some masculine traits.
It's like,
And
Not me.
Kumatora
I'm
feels so much
100%
more.
feminine.
Kumatora
we did the test, they came back, you're 100% feminine. Yeah, go for
I
it.
just wanted to throw in that kind of the fact that Mother 3 is a much more personal game. It kind of makes it unfortunate that it wasn't really as well received in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that, yeah, you could say something about that too, with
Is that
all
so?
this
I hadn't
talk
heard
of the
that.
stereotypes that we were just having.
It didn't really fly over there as well?
There are a lot of people who are just sort of like, what is this? This is not the Mother series. This is, what is this?
Huh.
Yeah, they felt, because when they advertised Mother 3, it was alongside of the release of Mother 1+2, and I think that was attracting mainly a lot of older fans.
Yeah, the typical RPG hardcore guys,
Yeah.
and then they see this chapter system, they're like, what is this?
And
got a
eventually the
question
games
back there? Or
themselves
comment?
so good, they were like putting bargain bins in Japan, I heard.
Well, if only I could
That's
do
true of
that.
almost every game in Japan, though. After
Okay,
like
so-
a month after release, it'll go in the bargain bin for $5.
Well, this had
Yeah.
like way too many games in the bargain bin, it was excessively.
Question or comment?
Oh, actually, I had a comment about Tony, where, and I haven't played Mother 3, but what you guys are saying about the gypsies and everything. Itoy was asked in an interview, I don't know if people have read it, but like what he was going for with putting Tony in the game. And he said, well, I've got a lot of gay friends and I wanted to show a normal world. And a normal world, you have gay kids, so I put a gay kid in there.
Yeah.
And I think that he said similar things about Mother 3 with, characters who were disabled, who were thieves,
Yeah.
who were, and a
Yeah,
sign of
Duster's
like,
a very important character for that reason.
Yeah.
Itoy in general is interested in people who are forced to exist on the fringe of society.
Oh,
Who are
I'd like to-
perfectly good people.
I'd like to say something though with what you just said. Itoy said exactly that there are gay kids in the world, meaning that there are children like as young as very young really who have already figured out what their gender and sexuality identity is, and he's showing that there is absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Well, thank you, Itoy, for everything.
I think that's why it comes off as such like a good,
Yeah.
effective representation is like, he's
Itoy's
just trying to
all
show
like
a
this.
normal world with
Yeah.
normal people in it, and we're all normal.
Because
so.
it's drawn from life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point. I thought it was interesting that I know that he alluded to the fact that it was probably Tony was gay, but I think if you're kind of growing up as a kid and you're not really sure how to interpret it, I think it's cool to think that even if it was like a platonic relationship, nothing wrong with Tony being able to express his care for Jeff to say, hey, take care, be safe, all this stuff, because it's like, you don't have to be like a super masculine guy like the guys you see on it.
Yeah, yeah, that's another good point.
Yeah, because like think about, I was reading this study a couple days ago that showed some old photos from like the late 1800s, early 1900s of like adult men taking photos with themselves and their friends, and it was kind of interesting because like they were like these old photos, like completely like stoic faces, but they would like hold hands or hold arms or like sit on each other's lap, like stuff you would not see at all today. But it was like back then it was more comfortable to do that, but
Gender norms have been rigid for a long time, but that doesn't mean they've been the same for a long time. Like, you used to dress your male child in a big frilly dress with curly locks. That was a thing.
That was a thing back
Pink
in.
used to be a boy color because
Yeah,
it was
exactly,
aggressive, and blue used to be a girl color because it
And
was
then arbitrarily
What the heck
switched,
happened?
yeah.
Can you make up your mind?
Yeah.
Why can't you tell anyone, right? Okay, so there is one more thing I would like to bring up. we've been talking about gay characters, we've been talking about girl characters, but then, and this is mostly for people who played Mother 3, I'm sorry again, but there shouldn't be any spoilers in this, but what about Lucas?
Yeah. I personally, I think a lot of people are probably going to echo this, but like, when I was a kid, so this is me in the before times. So I was a little dandelion-headed, skinny, blonde boy who cried at everything. I really relate to that. Like, I like the wimpy little crybaby character.
Yeah, like these days you
That
mostly
spoke to
see.
me.
These days you mostly see like the hyper masculine characters or the like, just basically characters who act all tough and don't have a lot to cry about, or they're even like a little too angry.
They have a lot to cry about, but they don't.
But then you have Lucas, who he's just this little kid who has so much stuff happening to him, and he doesn't react with like anger or like rage. He does what any human being would do, and that's cry.
Yeah.
Isn't it that also both Ness and Lucas, as silent protagonists, are a vanilla plate for us to project?
Yeah.
To be us.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And that's really.
Well, I'd
that's
actually
part of
argue
the
that
beauty.
less so Lucas, but because
Sure.
Lucas has a little bit more personality just because
I
he's
agree.
a mother.
But it's still the silent
It's
protagonist.
still intended to be you, but Lucas himself has the more personality, as you see in like earlier chapters in the game, how he's like little crybaby, scared and timid,
And
like
he does
how
have-
he just lets Klaus run off to do you know what.
Yeah. And this is compared to Ness and even Ninten, who are, boys who are into baseball, have their baseball bats.
Well, to be fair, both Ness and Lucas get sad when their mom's not around.
That's and that is a very human emotion. You don't have to be a big, strong guy to not love
Notice
your mom.
I tried to phrase that in a way that didn't give any spoilers at all.
But I think what's also so special about Lucas is that in mainstream media today, in all the children's shows, all the heroes are the firebrands who have all this energy and, rush into things and are kind of dim, but they're, rah, like just so passionate, I guess. And it's a little like, okay, cool down, hotshot. Whereas Lucas, you kind of want to see him grow and succeed.
Yeah.
It's like Lucas feels more how a kid at that age going through what he goes through should feel. Because in the cartoons, it's like these kids, if something bad happens, oh well, they just pick themselves up and away they go.
Well, thank God for Rebecca Sugar.
Yeah.
No
kidding.
That's another panel. Especially,
Yeah, that's another panel.
Yeah. Especially with these last week episodes, though.
Alright, back to Mother.
I'd like to say that there's a really great comparison that you can make between the way that Flint reacts
No spoilers.
and the way that Lucas reacts to things that happen very early on in the game.
There is a very big difference, that's right.
And it's interesting to see how, earlier we were talking about the mushroom trip, where you see Flint, and I feel like that projected onto Lucas, the way that he reacted to the previous event. And it's really amazing to see that he's also showing the way that kids, that stays with a kid for
That's
really
formative.
long time.
And you get the implied character growth at the end of the game where you see Flint again lamenting over a very similar thing. And except this time his reaction is his reaction is completely different.
He's grown a lot too.
Yeah, it's a perfect game.
It is perfect.
You should really go please play it.
And if I recall correctly, Lucas and Klaus have have very subtly different responses. Because if I recall correctly, Lucas doesn't talk.
Yeah, he just shuts down altogether.
Yeah, he just shuts down. And
Which happens.
Klaus is quiet but angry. Like you can
Yeah.
read it in his voice. He's
Yeah.
upset.
And his
It's like a lotus gun at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
I think it's a good representation that, having more controls or, I don't want to say they both have control over the emotions because, Lucas shuts down. That's not control.
Right.
Well, it's just
Klaus
his
gets out of
responses.
hand. Yeah, exactly.
It's
So,
their natural responses as just kids.
But, yeah, of course. But, letting yourself get out of hand, that led to very bad things.
Mhm.
And so I think that kind of representation is really important.
Well, I think it's important to note though that Klaus's reaction when he got out of hand was a violent one.
Yeah.
And Lucas's when he, you know,
It wasn't helpful, but it was probably a better way to handle it.
yeah, it was less damaging.
Yeah.
And I think that pretty much wraps up all the talking points we had. We still have about 20 minutes left, so the question we wanted to ask you guys is, and this was in the survey too, but how did the Mother series help you just get a better understanding of gender and identity? Was there a specific point? Yeah.
I did answer the survey, but like what I said was that I feel like it created this really great world where you can see a whole bunch of people, like this huge variety of people, and all of them are about on equal playing fields, and they're all like equally accepted by people, and you can see that no matter who you are and who you end up being, that there are like this huge variety of people that still accept you because there are these characters that are like that and people accept them.
Yeah.
I
feel like the only characters in the game that had any expectation for the male characters or the female characters were maybe the mothers of the protagonists who are like, you're my big strong boy.
Yeah.
And everyone else is like, it doesn't matter where you came from or who you are.
Just a mom thing.
Yeah,
that's definitely a mom thing.
In one sense, but at the same time, even those characters get homesick. But even women kick ass. Even women can be androgynous or refer to themselves with different pronouns. It doesn't matter, and that's what I think the game really instilled in a lot of people.
When I was a kid, Earthbound was the only game I played where there was a male character who had healing powers, where Ness has all the healing role, and then Paula has all the attack spells. That goes as far as like even like Final Fantasy 1, all the protagonists are supposed to be male, but people think the white mage is a girl just because they're so used to girls being healers. And that had a big effect on me. And also, like Tony, I know a lot of people didn't like necessarily pick it up, but I was exactly like Tony when I was a kid in like middle school. I had a huge crush on my best friend, and I was a total idiot. I did the phone thing where like don't want to hang up, and like all that like stupid awkward stuff. Like, is the kind of thing you do when you're a kid and you're gay and you haven't really processed it yet. You do like dumb things, and I thought that was a really good. It was really helpful in like seeing something like that and being like, that's okay. You can be a silly little kid and nobody's going to be mad at you. No one's going to hate you. You won't lose your friends because of it.
I similarly was also Tony growing up, but I think the mid-90s was a much different time, not as accepting. So,
oh my gosh,
like,
that is why.
So I had a hard time with it. Everyone else around me was not very supportive, but a lot of pain and tears later, I think always going back to that and the representation, I was just so thankful that there could at least be one scenario in my mind where it could be a positive reality.
Yeah. It's probably why Earthbound coming out in 1995 makes it so important.
So we got people in here who haven't played Mother series since, and I feel like I waited at least a decade or more of my life for it to come out, especially with how I had a lot of limitations to technology until like high school, which honestly wasn't that long ago. So I'm going to talk as vague about this as I can for people who haven't played the game, but a character in Mother 3 who's interpreted to have gone AWOL, switched sides at a point, people who played kind of use those to figure out who I'm talking about. Correlate the individual with Tony and how I saw it when I was playing the game when I was a teenager. Is the correlation between Tony, someone who's accepted themselves as who they are and they're happy about it, and surrounded by people who also accept him for what he is, and our AWOL character, in my opinion, seemed like they were forced to change, and how in the end of their character as a whole was devastating. They were just, they were gone. And at least in how I thought about it, is because they weren't true to themselves. And when you discovered remnants of their home, which just the placement of the houses in of itself proves that this individual still knew who they were, but because they were surrounded by individuals who weren't accepting of it, they themselves chose not to be accepting of it, and look what happened.
Their name's a big hint.
Yeah, so I'm not saying nothing.
Yeah.
Honestly, I
So,
didn't even look at it that way.
the same character actually, it's sort of after the whole translation thing, they showed the unused sprites, and one of the big things is that character that might have been a rewrite as they were editing the ending. The last person might have been someone else, and once again, it's the ending we can't really talk about.
Yeah.
But even that person being switched out is sort of another interesting thing that I can't elaborate on.
Yeah, definitely.
Good job. Yes, play Mother 3.
Come on, Reggie, give us Mother 3.
Welcome to Summerbound Encore.
Any other comments?
I would just like to say that usually when you see cosplay and stuff, I dressed up as Kumatora today. A couple of people come up to me. One of them was one of the little kids who's here at the conference. Says, "You don't really see a guy dress up as a girl character very often, but you always tend to see girl characters dress up as people like Link and whatnot." And I'd just like to say thank you to the Earthbound community for being so supportive and excited about it.
So I'm a C-shed heterosexual girl. But when I played Earthbound, and Mother 3, and I started to see these other characters who didn't share my sexual orientation or identity, it made me wonder. Like, that's the biggest thing. It made me wonder what their lives were like, what their struggles were like as real people.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you get the talk, the whatever in high school. You know, oh, well, there are these other people. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for
like the way,
Hi, we exist. Hi.
the way they make it sound like, you know, other people who aren't heterosexual are unicorns. And it made me wonder, who are these people? Like, what are they like? And it made me ask. It made me ask questions. Even though I wasn't part of that community, even though I knew I was like an outsider to that whole world, it made me ask questions.
It broadened your perspective.
About that community, and so I think
questions are good.
that yes, even though it does bring together the LGBTQ plus community, it also helps include the people outside of that, in that it makes you ask.
Yeah. One of the hallmarks,
something we are not trained to do.
One of the hallmarks of a great piece of art is if it gets you to ask questions about the nature of reality.
That is why representation is important. It gets people to wonder and research and ask these questions. Because the reason why people think that we're so rare is because we're not represented properly.
Up until about a couple years ago, I think Chaz Bono was like the first like major transgender person that the media caught hold of in my lifetime, my adult lifetime. And he was kind of treated as like, oh, interesting, good for him though. And then just in the past like 5 years even, trans people have become so much more visible, like just leaps and bounds. I started transition in like 2011 or something, and when I did, thank you. Even then though, just that recently, I had to go to these obscure little websites to find information, like, okay, what are hormones, what do I do, how do I get a doctor to do this, what is this world? And now it's just like, oh, go to transgender.com.
It's actually .org.
Being trans is so over now. Go ahead.
I just wanted to throw in the flip side of that is I've been part of that community and raised in such an open environment for such a long time that it didn't even faze me when I played the games, and I really didn't think about it that hard.
Like, people get worked up about this, weird.
It's like, this is life.
Yeah, to add to that, when I was streaming Mother 3 with my friend and my girlfriend was actually really like put off by the Gypsies at first when they first showed up, because she thought, she was nervous that, and I'm sorry for taking over, but she was nervous that they wouldn't be represented properly, that they would be like just one big drag queen joke.
I was worried about that too.
But then, as I continued on with the game, now she just absolutely loves them after she saw how the characters are represented, how there is no joke behind them. They're actually very, very important to the story.
And they just are what they are.
Yeah, they're part of the natural world.
Yeah.
And no one questions it. I mean, no one in the actual game actually questions them.
Yeah.
as
Exactly.
characters.
No one questions it.
No, no one turns around and asks, well, why is that? Why do they have a beard? I'm confused.
I'm gonna make one more comment to demonstrate. You can see my chest hair. You can see I have a beard right now. Back in Boston, I sometimes will dress in drag, but I'm not trying to pretend I'm anything else. It is completely expression. And I think that form of drag is becoming more and more prevalent now. Thanks RuPaul's Drag Race, thanks all that. And so I think now looking back at the Gypsies, it's really nice to be able to kind of see, okay, well, this is really what the world is kind of going to anyway, where it is such an accepting thing. And you just kind of go with it, and it is what it is, you know?
Yeah.
So thanks.
I just remember I grew up in South Georgia, where there are very strong stigmas there, and every time I played Earthbound, I never picked up on Tony at all, and not at all. And even my parents were pretty liberal, I just didn't see it. And then I didn't realize it until I actually read it straight up that it said he was. And that kind of like echoed throughout the rest of my life, because when people told me, there are people I never suspected, I was just like, really? And the importance was it kind of taught me like, you can't just go around assuming everyone's the same as you. You gotta to like be aware of what comments you're making and not just assume that everyone in the room thinks exactly the way you do, that you are the way you are, and that people who are different aren't really all that different.
In the back there? Yep.
That's you.
Oh, okay. So, I've been agender forever, basically. Like 20, 25 years now, I've been out as agender on the internet and stuff like that. But even as recently as 10 years ago, when Mother 3 first came out, and I played it in Japanese like the month it came out, it really, really touched me back in Chapter 1, when you're going to the Magypsies, where Alec is like, they're not male or female, they're not even human, but they're my best friends.
Yeah.
And that's
representation.
Every single one of them is a weirdo, and that's okay. He says that. He literally says that.
Yeah.
And that really meant a lot to me back then.
Along a similar line, that dialogue with Alec and Flint, I find it like interesting how Flint is like asking Alec questions, like actually canonically while they're on the way over there, but when Alec mentions that they're not male or female, there's just like no further questions. It's just okay.
All right, sure.
Okay, it's not this or that guy.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
It's not feared, it's understood.
Yeah. Exactly.
Weirdest thing you see today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So last fall, I, like a lot of people, played Dragon Age Inquisition, and I came away from it. You're not gonna like the next part. I came away from it really disappointed because I felt that the way characters interacted with their identity was very flat. And I think that part of the reason that happened was that the game was lost in systems and mechanics. And I'm wondering if people who have these experiences with Mother 3 might be able to lend some perspective on this. Is the reason that it's able to have such depth in identity expression is that it doesn't have to get lost in mechanics and systems? Because I look at these BioWare games and I'm like, these don't feel like people at all, they feel like dialogue trees with faces.
Well, Shigesato Ito is a writer.
Yeah.
That's what he does, he writes characters.
It's a story as much as it is a game.
Speaking of mechanics, the hot flashes, like,
Yeah.
It's always said in an interview that he meant that to be like, basically the menstrual cycle. So
Yeah.
you have like
compares
a
it to-
male
yeah.
protagonist having hot flashes
Yeah.
whenever he's about to get a new power.
And Kumatora, but yeah.
I can confirm that it's pretty similar.
To throw something in about Shigesato Ito writing the dialogue and how it feels like natural and all that, he actually wrote the dialogue for Earthbound by dictating it one character at a time to someone at a keyboard.
Yeah.
He's actually said he doesn't think the game would have turned out even remotely the same if he hadn't.
That's deliberate. That is a high level of deliberateness.
Yeah. To build on that, one thing you might not notice if you've only played the games in translation, in all 3 Mother games, all of the text is in kana. Even if you're Japanese, if you're playing the game, you have to read the dialogue out loud to understand it, because you're so used to reading things in kanji. You can look at a line and not know what it says until you sound it out, and you're like, oh, that's what it means. So it forces you to slow down and read everything out loud.
Cool.
And I think that's
Another thing we
very
wouldn't know if we didn't.
We have like 5 minutes left, so I guess 2 or 3 more questions or comments.
Another, like, along that line with kana, not only is that it means you have to slow down, but it also makes it more accessible to younger audiences, because you don't learn kanji until you're like in school in Japan. And I think that's really cool because it shows that the game is still geared toward kids despite dealing with these like really important themes.
And it's accessible. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I was just gonna ask if we were gonna ever talk about the Mr. Saturns. Because
do we have
quite different in themselves. Maybe
We
that's
have
cool.
5 minutes.
We have 5 minutes. I guess if we have a very short comment, then we can.
So just a comment that I see a lot on the interwebs and just with a lot of people in gender, in general, not gender. Regardless of what you are, how you identify as, sexual orientation, whatever, it's okay. It is completely okay. I see a lot of people talking about so many of these issues and they attack the cisgendered person just because. And it's not your fault. Like, what you are who you are regardless of who you are. Just embrace it. We're all friends. We're all people. It's okay.
What we are not is Mr. Saturn's.
Is there anything we absolutely need to hit before we leave? Any topic that just sort of...
There is one thing that I wanted to bring up, and that was headcanons.
Oh man.
That's one thing I wanted to bring up.
That keep going.
Don't ask me about mine, it's crazy.
I'm not going to ask what everyone's headcanons are. That's gonna go on forever. But here is one thing that I absolutely love about the game. With the exception of Tony and the Magypsies, the game drops absolutely no hints as to what the character's like sexual identity is, and I think that is great because that is all open interpretation, and it also shows that it doesn't have to be a defining quality of the character themselves.
And we had tons of comments in the survey saying, well, I like Mother 3 because my headcanon of Lucas was this, and this made me feel better about this. And that was like, we had at least like 30 different people saying that.
Yeah, and that's actually very important because if you project, some people project themselves on the characters, or some people give themselves their own. It's basically their way of representation by projecting what they feel the characters could be, as basically to help themselves or just to give the games a little more variety, things like that. I have my own headcanons. I'm not going to say what they are.
I think we all do.
Yeah, but I just am glad that the games don't make a point of saying, oh, this character is absolutely this. Do not, things like that. And I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Maybe one very last one.
One more, yes.
Me?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things is that Troy has left it very open for people to have their own headcanons. And he's specifically said, I want this game to be different for everyone who's played it.
Yeah,
personal.
That is a very important message.
So I think he gives you the pieces, the basic elements, and then he allows you to relate to the game your own way. So.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
And that's just why it makes it such a great series, such a great game. So yeah, let's go out there and play some Earthbound, guys.
Thank you all for your support. You've all been absolutely lovely.